It is easy to gang up on the media. The press can be criticized fairly for lots of things, including being obsessed with trivial scandals and sleazy stories, not to mention at times being biased, corrupt, self-important, thin-skinned, and possessed of a gift for groupthink. I will give you all of that. I totally get it. But it is equally true that there is no other institution in this country that is more important to our democracy than a free press. Don't take it from me. Take it from this guy. He's Thomas Jefferson. In 1786, he wrote, quote, "Our liberty cannot be guarded but by the freedom of the press, nor that be limited without danger of losing it." No freedom without freedom of the press. Limitations on freedom of the press mean losing our freedom. So says Jefferson, so says me, so says everything we know about democracy and history. Why am I getting all emphatic and boring and insistent about freedom of the press? Well, here, in 2005, you will recall that we started to learn a lot of creepy things about our government that should have been shocking. First, we learned that a super-secret program authorized by former President Bush allowed the National Security Agency to eavesdrop on some Americans' foreign phone calls without permission from a court. Later, we learned that it wasn't just Americans' phone calls, but also banking records that were being scrutinized. Later still, author James Bamford found out that phone calls from U.S. military personnel and aid workers abroad to loved ones back home, calls like, pillow talk and family fights and stuff, were being intercepted and then passed around to amuse the other eavesdroppers. Well, now, thanks to the extraordinary interviews this week on Countdown with Keith Olbermann here on MSNBC, we have been told that the NSA basically spied on any American it wanted to, regardless of whether any foreign communications were involved, and it is alleged that they specifically targeted journalists. Had we learned all of these revelations at once, all at one time, we might have been shocked to the point of pitchforks in the street. But since these details have come out little by little over more than 3 years, each new revelation has made an impact, but I'm not sure that the cumulative impact has yet set in. Here's the shocking bottom line. The U.S. government has been taping all of our calls and recording all of our emails. And an analyst involved in the program at the NSA says they specifically targeted journalists. Nixon's enemies list initially had about 20 names on it. This administration's list includes the entire American press corps. Joining us now is Carl Bernstein, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author, who, of course, is best known for his expose with Bob Woodward of the Watergate scandal, which ended the presidency of Richard Nixon. Mr. Bernstein, thank you for coming on the show tonight.
Good to be here.
What is your reaction to these new allegations that we've heard on Keith's show this week?
That we don't know what they mean and what they are. I wouldn't go as far as you did. I think that there is an overwhelming problem with the Bush presidency about secret government, and that these allegations go to that. But more than that, there was a systemic failure because the Congress of the United States failed in its oversight function in terms of the war and national security considerations and torture and the role of the NSA and the other intelligence agencies. They didn't know what the hell this presidency was doing. However, from what we know about the NSA, it is the largest of the intelligence agencies. It gets the largest part of the intelligence budget, and it's like a giant vacuum cleaner that vacuums up all our incoming phone data, email data, and that's its function. The question is, how is that data examined? Now,
is it their function to collect all of that information, or did they decide that was their function? I'm not sure. It was never the remit of the agency that they should collect all of the communications into and out of the country.
The question about, there's a great book about the NSA called The Puzzle Palace that was written a number of years ago that explains its function very well. It is subject to great abuse because it has such a wide charter and because so much of intelligence collecting is electronic. And when you start digitalizing this information and looking for a needle in a haystack, if something was done, such as taking journalistic institutions, a newspaper, this network, or whatever, and systematically targeting, as you said, it is an absolute, total outrage, unconstitutional, the kind of thing that somebody ought to be prosecuted for. But we don't know that's what's happened. What we do know is that we need to know what happened in the Bush presidency in all of these areas. President Obama has said, look, he wants to look forward. He doesn't want to look backward. At the same time, I am sure that he wants to find out what is going on in the intelligence agencies, put a stop to the excesses, such as he has with Guantanamo, for instance. And in the process, I would hope we'd find out what the hell has been going on.
Well, these latest allegations are from a man who, it seems to be unquestioned, is in a position to know what the information that he is alleging. Certainly it is allegations at this point, but we also know from the other allegations that have been proven about the NSA that they have the capacity for doing this. The only thing we need to find out is whether or not we're willing to believe they do it and whether or not we're willing to follow the trail to find out, in fact, they do.
Well, the latter part is the important thing. Let's find out what is going on. I think that we really need to. I read the transcripts of Keith's broadcast with Mr. Tice about 4 times. It's very difficult in places to see exactly what he's saying about reporters, about what is coming from the FBI, about what is coming from the NSA. If you look at it very closely, he says it's compartmentalized. He doesn't know how this was used. He saw something that was collected. We ought to find out what that was. But I wouldn't make the leap to an enemies list, for instance, and say that Karl Rove was running around with all this information.
Using it to take people down.
Exactly.
Right. But the idea that they would choose journalists as a group, as targets, is...
You're right.
Yeah.
If they chose journalists as a group, as targets, it would be an outrage.
Yeah.
The question is, did they choose journalists as a group, as targets? I'm not sure that's what the gentleman said on your air. It's a little ambiguous. We ought to find out.
Well, he's said, from his perspective, as I understand it, the way I heard it, is that they pick journalists as targets, and what we need now is we need a government.
I hope that's not the case, because if it is, there ought to be hell to pay.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. Carl Bernstein, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for coming in. Carl Bernstein, of course, Pulitzer Prize-winning author and journalist.